Arkansas basketball has been getting a lot of love in early preseason polls and lists, but there seems to be one piece of this team in particular that's pretty underrated. Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorback podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pod at the Palace edition. Curtis Wilkerson here with you this afternoon, flying solo. I know, Arkansas football's right around the corner, but Razorback fans are built different, and it's basketball season year-round in these parts, especially in the build-up to John Calipari's first season at the helm here in Fayetteville. Speaking of Fayetteville, the Razorbacks took a couple weeks off after their summer workouts, but they moved back onto campus over the weekend in advance of the start of the fall semester, and they're getting ready to hit the hardwood and get back to practice, get ready for the season. But still, man, we don't get to see this bunch in action for another couple months, and that's scrimmages at that before you get into the season in November. It's talking season right now with basketball, and that's okay. Projections, way too early polls, top 10 list. I mean, we've seen Arkansas get a lot of love recently, ranked in almost every top 25 poll that you see out there. If you follow Arkansas basketball's Twitter page, you're going to see that they're one of 5 SEC schools with multiple impact transfers. They're one of 3 with multiple impact freshmen. That's all according to John Rothstein. But you know what they haven't tweeted about? Having one of the best front courts in the country. And I think they do, but I saw a couple lists this past week that did not include Arkansas. Was a little surprised to see that the field of 68 did not have Arkansas's front court in its top 10. And look, no shade, no shots fired here. They may have had Arkansas at number 11 for all I know. I mean, there's more than 340 Division I basketball teams out there. But the top 10 front courts that the field of 68 had listed in order were Kansas, Duke, Indiana, Alabama, Baylor, UConn, Creighton, Auburn, Houston, and Gonzaga. So, I mean, obviously a lot of heavy hitters in there for sure. And a lot of those, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't have much of a beef with the inclusion of a lot of these teams. Kansas is stacked with Hunter Dickinson. KJ Adams are both back. Flory Badunga is a big-time addition there as a true freshman. Alabama, they returned both Grant Nelson and Jaren Stevenson from last year. And then they went out and added Big Cliff Omoyuri from Rutgers to kind of solidify things around the rim in terms of shot blocking and rim protection. That's pretty good. Indiana, low key, they add Umar Ballo to Mackenzie Mbako and Malik Renault. That's a pretty nasty trio. But the more I look at it, the more surprised I am. I think that Arkansas is not on this list because when you look at the Razorback front court, I see top end talent. I see that the depth is there. I see that the versatility is there. For comparison's sake, take Auburn at number 8, for example. Yes, they're returning Janai Broome, he's a bad man. He's really good. It feels like he's been in the league for a decade. Big-time all-SEC returner. He's a stud. Hey, so is Jonas Adu. Quite frankly, another all-SEC player. So I think the star power at the top is relatively close. If you want to tell me that Janai Broome's better than Jonas Adu or more accomplished, whatever, you wouldn't get a huge argument with me, but they're 2 of the best in the league, right? Auburn's backup center, Dylan Cardwell, he averaged 5.3 points and 3.7 boards per game last year, played about 15 minutes per game. You guys remember Cardwell. He's strong as an ox, great energy guy, gets him hyped up. He kind of is what he is at this point as a backup center. For Arkansas, it's Big Z, right? And he averaged 5.5 points and 3.3 boards in 12 minutes per game last season as a freshman. So very similar production there between the two. But are we arguing that Big Z doesn't have, maybe a higher ceiling and a higher room for growth, given his youth, the skill set, and his circumstances from last year? At the 4, Chris Moore for Auburn, West Memphis product, Arkansas kid. Everybody remembers him. Stats honestly don't tell the whole story with Chris Moore, but 2.5 points, 1.8 rebounds per game, very versatile defender, great glue guy, experience. He's been there forever, Arkansas's version of that's Adu Thiero, though, who has also been around the league going into his 3rd year. He averaged triple the points per game and triple the rebounds per game, and I would say is an equal or better defender, especially in terms of versatility. And Thiero's also being mocked in some first-round NBA draft projections for 2025. The other guy that was listed for Auburn in this field of 68 thing was Chaney Johnson, which is a really cool story in my opinion. I mean, he was a Division II guy who transferred up, worked his way into the rotation at Auburn, developed into a really nice role player for him. 5 points, 3.5 boards last season. I bet he'll have a better year this year. But the one forward we haven't talked about for Arkansas is Trevin Brazile, right? And 8.6 points, 6 boards on 35% shooting from three. And he's coming off an injury last year. I wouldn't say that Trevin Brazile had the season that a lot of Razorback fans expected from him. I don't think Brazile had the season that he expected from himself, but still was productive, is another year removed from that injury, and is a guy that we know has a lot of high upside. So let me be clear. I'm not downplaying Auburn's inclusion on this list. I actually really like that group a lot, and I think they're going to have a really solid team who can contend for an SEC championship this year. Honestly, I just chose them because it's the team that Arkansas fans are probably the most familiar with. You know the players. It's easy to make that comparison, but it just feels a little bit odd to me that an objective viewpoint here could include the Tigers on a list of top front courts in the country and leave the Razorbacks off. And so I don't know. This is all hypothetical right now. Like I said, the games aren't going to be played until November. We'll see how it all plays out. We thought the Razorbacks were going to be really good last year. And, it turns out they weren't. They were below 500. So things happen. Sometimes it doesn't go according to plan. But if you look on paper, which is all we can do right now, I don't know. It feels like they should be there to me. Are Arkansas's bigs getting slept on here? I don't know. I'm going to explain, though, why I'm so bullish on them. So stay tuned here right with us. All right, everybody. Well, I want to take a moment here to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. You hear us talking about them all the time. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you with the start of the NFL season right around the corner. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbooks. Pretty good deal. You got to check it out. All right, everybody, continuing on our discussion here on the Razorback big men. Now, the reason I'm so high on this front court, it's not just because they're extremely talented, and I think they are, but to me, it's how the pieces fit together. Arkansas's had teams in the past couple years here that have been really talented, but last year's a prime example of how sometimes that's not what matters. The pieces have to fit together the right way. I really like the way Arkansas complements itself at the 4 and the 5 this season. Jonas Adu, in my opinion, was one of the most improved players in the SEC last season. He really was. And he wound up getting all league honors as a result of it. A double-digit scorer. He's good around the rim. He developed a mid-range jumper. You can play him in dribble handoff. You can play him in ball screen action. He's really come a long way. He was 4th in the league in rebounds. He was 3rd in block shots. He's the real deal. Adu is at center. And I think he can really serve as an anchor for this team around the rim. Big Z, I go back to what Bobby Petrino said about Rodney Hill in the running back room. He said he just brings a little bit of a different flavor. And that really stood out to me. Same thing here with Big Z. I think he brings a little bit different flavor to that center position. He's such a unique player. I mean, he adds just different elements when it comes to the way he plays the game. There's not many 7'2" guys out there who can knock down threes, pass at the position as well as Z does. I think he just brings some real pop off the bench. And when you look at the 1-2 punches at center in the league, I mean, honestly, I think by the end of the season, Jonas Adu and Big Z are going to be right in the thick of that conversation, which is why I think I'm so surprised that they weren't on that field of 68 list, And then at the 4, I feel even stronger about this at the 4, personally. I absolutely love the change of pace between Adu Thiero and Trevin Brazile. I really do. They're both modern day 4s, kind of in their own unique ways. Thiero really is he's a jumbo wing, right? He's more of a 4-3, 3-4, however you want to categorize that, because he's so strong and physically imposing. But you can also switch pretty much everything with him. really has lockdown defender potential. And I don't know, he's just the type of guy that brings toughness, a lot of versatility. You can run a lot of different lineups with him. And he's really, I think, kind of the glue guy to the operation for Arkansas out there on the floor. You pair that with Trevin Brazile, who's just a different kind of player, right? I mean, he can really stretch the floor and shoot it. So that brings a lot to the team in terms of spacing. We know he's a major lob threat that can go up and finish over the top of folks. And he really thrives, I think, as a weak side shot blocker and a rim protector. So two completely different players that complement each other at that position. You have it at the 4 and the 5. And I really like the way you can mix and match, between all four of them. You can effectively play big or small. I mean, you could play Thiero and Brazile together in your front court if you got to go small ball, and there are a lot worse options out there. I guess you could play Big Z and Adu together. Depending on the matchups, it would work offensively because, you've got Adu roaming around the rim. You've got Big Z, who's a good passer and can space the floor from 3, so it wouldn't be, overly clunky out there. And that's a good thing, but it's all about matchups defensively, and Coach Cal ain't running a zone. So you might see a little bit of that. Not a lot, although he's not allergic to playing two true big men together there. Defensively, I think, an Adu, Thiero, Jonas, Adu combination would be really tough and a lot of fun to watch. I think Arkansas is going to be good defensively this season anyway. But then on the offensive end, I mean, how intriguing would a Trevin Brazile and Big Z combo be sharing the floor? Sign me up for that. 3-point shooting, both guys who can go up above the rim and catch it and throw it down on somebody's head. I mean, I don't know. They could be a pretty fun and flashy group to watch if Arkansas was looking for a little bit more firepower in a certain lineup. Could be cool. In my projected starting lineup, I've got both of those guys coming off the bench, so maybe they would play together. But you might see them mix and match a little bit, where you've got Adu with Brazile, and then Adu Thiero with Jonas Adu there. So, or with Big Z, excuse me. So I don't know, man. I think they've got a lot of different combinations they could use there. It's a deep group. It's pretty fun. Still long way to go before we can see how it all plays out, but it's certainly a group that looks like a lot of fun on paper to me. And I think you'd be hard pressed to really look at it objectively and find 10 front courts that have the amount of talent, versatility, and depth that this group does. But it got me to thinking a little bit, like, where does it stack up against some of Arkansas's front courts from the past? Interesting. We'll talk about it here in just a second in the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Motors, Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, back for the final segment here of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, Pot at the Palace edition. Keeping with the front court theme of the day, like I said, I got to thinking a little bit about where this group stacks up against some of the past front courts at Arkansas. Jonas Adu, Trevin Brazile, Big Z, Adu Thiero, it's a pretty salty group. We talked about it. And again, we'll have to see how it all plays out, but projections and comparisons and what ifs, that's what we got to work with right now. So that's what we're going to talk about, but looking back at, Arkansas's front courts under Eric Musselman, I think it would be, I would pretty clearly take the group that Arkansas has right now. I think over any of those the last 5 seasons. Last year was Mekhi Mitchell, Jalen Graham, Chandler Lawson, and Brazile, right? So, you've already got one of those guys back on the team. And listen, Mekhi Mitchell, I was probably higher on him than anybody. if you go back and look at some of the things I wrote about the guy, he was playing really good basketball at the end of the season, but Jonas Adu did it from start to finish, and he was an all-SEC player. Adu against Arkansas and Bud Walton last year, he had 23 points on 11 of 14 shooting and a dozen rebounds. And in that same game, Mekhi Mitchell had 1 point and 1 rebound in 11 minutes. Jonas Adu was a problem. He was a menace in Bud Walton Arena. Hey, give me some of those 23 and 12s this year in a Razorback uniform. Sign me up for that. I think about Big Z last year. He didn't play much in that game, the College Game Day at Arkansas. It was like his second or third game since getting eligible. Kai had a double-double in that one. He played really well, I remember. But in that shootout they had late in the year at Rupp, Big Z was pretty good. I think he was just shy of a double-double. It was like 12 points, 9 boards. So he was pretty solid in that one. If I had to pick a Musselman front court that was the closest to this group, it would probably be that 2020-21 group that had Justin Smith, a freshman Jalen Williams. Connor Vanover started strong that year, and he kind of fizzled out. Ethan Henderson had some moments there. Vance Jackson, he never really popped. So that group didn't really have the depth. Thinking back a little bit further, 2017-2018 was a pretty decent one, right? Daniel Gafford, Dustin Thomas, Trey Thompson was still around. Who else? Orlando Cook, young Adrio Bailey. So maybe not as talented top to bottom, but it was pretty deep there. Let's see. 2014-15, it had Bobby Portis and Moses Kingsley. That's good. I mean, that was before Moses Kingsley really broke out. The year before, maybe. Yeah. 2013-14, I guess it was. They had both of those guys then too, but they also had Cody Clark and Alandis Harris. That was pretty solid. That was a good one. Man, I don't know. I remember that 2007-2008 team. I think it was 07-08. They had like a million forwards, right? You guys remember that? It was like Darian Towns, Charles Thomas, Michael Washington, Vincent Hunter. I'm pretty sure Stephen Hill was on that team. Like they had a ton of dudes out there. So yeah, I mean, I think this could be one of the better Razorback front courts in recent memory, but I got to tell you, like, I don't know. It was a fun trip down memory lane, but I think anytime you start reaching back into the John Pelfrey era in August, it's probably time to wrap it up and call it a day. So maybe that's what we'll do. The early Nolan days and going back to the Eddie Sutton days, that was before my time. I can't go too far back there right now, just off the top of my head. I'd have to do a little bit more research, but that's okay. I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pot at the Palace edition. Appreciate everybody for tuning in as always, and be on the lookout for John Neighbors and Andrew Ellis on Tuesday. And I'll be looking forward to seeing all you guys again on Wednesday afternoon. Hope everybody has a great day, and we'll catch you guys very, very soon.